Oh, hang on. Okay, stop. So I'd like to introduce you to our art instructor tonight, Jennifer Evans. Jennifer has been leading workshops with our library for some time, but during this last year and a half, she's been pretty regular. And so some of you might already know her, but if you haven't met her yet, Jennifer is the owner of Periwinkle Art Studio, which is now in Racine. And she's also a mixed media artist and also does some marketing work. So Jennifer, welcome to our workshop.
Thank you. Good everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. While we are still kind of getting settled and getting people admitted into the session, I just wanted to find out kind of how kind of gauge with everybody according to their interest level and if they've done art journaling before. So if you want to type in the chat, let me know if you kind of have dabbled in art journaling before or are brand new and just need to get an idea about what it is. What is art journaling? What do I do? This is going to be kind of an overview of different ways to use your art journal. And I actually have, I'm going to be doing a class at CLC on Friday afternoons, mid-October from 3 to 5. So if you kind of get bitten by the bug here and want to do a little bit more, you might want to look into that class through CLC, their continuing education program. So we'll also try to give you some helpful resources if you want to do a little bit more in your art journal after tonight's session. There are some great resources other than YouTube. There are a lot of artists who are doing art journaling, including Mary Beth Shaw, who is the owner of Stencil Girl Products, which I designed for. She does quite a lot in her art journal. And if you're on Facebook, usually on Monday afternoons at noon, she'll go live with a little technique working in her art journal. So, and the Stencil Girl Products website has a blog and they have tons of tutorials on there. So you might want to go look that up and see what that's all about. Other than that, Stampington and Company is a magazine publisher. You might have seen at Barnes and Noble their periodical called Art Journaling. It's in their line along with Somerset Studio and some of their other magazines that I think they rotate on a quarterly basis. So the Art Journaling magazine or their publication probably is a little bit farther along than someone who's just starting with art journaling. So it's not going to give you a step-by-step and lead you through the process. It's going to assume that you know something about the art journaling process, and it'll just kind of give you a look at how different artists are using their art journal. So if you have any questions at all at any time, you can type that in the chat or unmute yourself and interrupt the class and ask, because you know, people might have the same questions as we're going along. And also Roz can watch the chat and prompt when it's, you know, when there's a break in the activity, and we can make sure that everybody's questions are answered. So I am going to take a minute here to set up my camera. So you're going to be looking down at my work surface, and I'm going to show you flip through my art journal and talk about supplies, and then we'll get going with some techniques. I'll turn some light on here. And if something happens, if my phone suddenly goes dark or something, you just never know. Sometimes with technology, it's great, but you know, sometimes you never know. Okay. So if you are in the market for an art journal, you might want to work in something that's spiral bound or something that's hard bound. I kind of do a little bit of everything. I don't have a spiral bound one close at hand to show you, but I tend to always have sketchbooks, all different sizes of sketchbooks handy, even when I'm watching TV, because I might have an idea for something. And then I use my art journals for a little bit of different variety of things. Usually it's to work out a design or play with some colors in my art journal before I take something larger to a canvas. So this is kind of just a collage background with some paint and some stenciling. So sometimes I'm working with color palettes. Sometimes it's just kind of a brain dump of things that might be going on. It might be doodles combined with words, combined with little scraps of things, little mementos. But basically, this is something that I travel with. Sometimes I will start my studio session with a warm up, and I'll use an art journal page just to kind of get my hands moving and thinking about what I want to create on the canvas. And other times it's on the back end of a studio session. So I might have a bunch of leftover paint on my palette, and I don't want that to go to waste. So I will just brush it on a page in my art journal, leave it open to dry. And then I've got, some backgrounds ready to go for the next time. So that's one of them. And the thing that I like about this particular journal is it's perforated. So if I happen to do something in here that I just really liked and I wanted to tear this out and put it, do something else with it, put it in a frame or whatever, I certainly could do that because it's perforated. So that's one of the nice things about finding a journal you really like. The spiral bound ones, just, you can flip over and just work on one page at a time. Some of those are perforated and you can tear things out and do other things with your art journaling pages once you're done with it. But what you want to look for if you're not buying something that says it's an art journal is you want to look for something with heavier paper. It's going to take all of the ink and paint and watercolor you might want to do in your art journaling without really seeping through, bleeding through the pages. But I will tell you a quick tip about if you buy an art journal and you're not sure that it's really going to stand up to your water media, what you can do is prep your pages with gesso. And gesso it's for surface prep. This is usually how I would start a canvas. And what it is it's a white, although they do sell gesso that's tinted. You can buy black gesso and you can buy, tinted colored gesso. But it's basically like an acrylic paint with a little bit of grit in it, like a plaster of Paris grit, so that it will prepare your surface for working with acrylic paint. So I will show you in a little bit how to treat your pages with gesso, but there are some people that will reuse old books. Like if you find a children's book and it's a really nice big size and you think, oh, that would make a really great art journal, gesso the pages and then, leave them open to dry. It might take you a little bit of time to set it up that way. But, once you've got it set it up, once you've got the pages prepped, then you've got something that you can throw in a bag and take with you. So this I took with me along with a set of my Neocolors, which are water soluble pastels. I throw these in a bag and take them with me. And this was when we stayed in a hotel down in St. Louis that had some really unique architectural. It was actually a converted train station. So I sat there and just kind of, made some doodles. And then I visited the art museum in St. Louis. And I really wanted to make a note about this color palette from this Van Gogh painting from 1890. So I just had everything with me. I just sat there for a minute and made some doodles. So that's one of my art journals. The other one is these books. They sell at Michael's, and it's not really intended to be an art journal. And you can see my pages are a little bit, there is some bleed through here. This is actually a drawing or a sketchbook. So I did not take the time to gesso these pages, but an art journal really is only for yourself. It's not meant to be, you know, perfect and pretty and for, you know, to be on display for anybody else. So whatever happens in your art journal can stay in your art journal. And it's kind of like if you ever kept a diary, it's the same sort of a concept. It's just that this has images, sometimes just words, sometimes just images, sometimes a smattering of both. So I like to use this, like sometimes I'll make a list. I'll make a list of things I want to remember about a season. Sometimes I'll illustrate a recipe, stamp with leaves. There's just all kinds of different things that I have done with my art journal. And again, this is not something where I really want to waste a canvas to do this, or, you know, a big sheet of watercolor paper or anything. It's just here all condensed in my art journal. So if you're going to purchase an art journal, you're going to look for something that has mixed media paper inside, a little heavyweight paper, something that will take the water media, markers and ink and paint and all of that. So a couple of different ways that I will start. And I said that I would show you this, technique right up front. I have to just find a, goodness. I'm gonna flip all the way to the back here and find an empty sheet, an empty spread. Usually what I'll do is I'll have a piece of wax paper or some extra paper towel, and I will create kind of a slip sheet for myself. So I'm gonna put this behind so that I can go all the way to the edge of my art journal and not worry about painting my pages together, if that makes sense. And I am just going to, I have some palette paper here. I'm going to put out a couple of paints just to get working, some different colors. And if anybody has any questions on anything so far, you can go ahead and ask that while I'm getting this set up. I'm going to start by talking to you about these water soluble, anything water soluble, whether it's a crayon or a pastel or watercolor pencils, as long as it says water soluble on it, I think it's a wonderful thing to use in your art, especially in your art journal, because you can draw with it and then you can kind of move it around with some water and blend everything. So if I wanted to, I do a lot of flowers. So let's say I wanted to just kind of doodle some flowers, and I'll do a stem and some leaves just to do something fun. You can see that this has kind of got a crayon-like texture to it when I'm just drawing with it. But if I took just water on my brush then and started to pull it around, because it's water soluble, I'm going to be able to kind of turn this into paint on my brush, and I can blend it with other pencils or different things like that. I can add paint to it. But if I wanted to start by sketching something and not with a brush, this would be one way, is to use something that's water soluble. The other thing that I like to do is sometimes I'll sit down and say, okay, what color am I drawn to today? What color do I feel like? Maybe my favorite color is like this blue, but I've had kind of a stressful day, and, you know, I just want to take some purple and like just scribble and, you know, say today was enough, had enough with today. Okay. That was my day. I can actually come in with my water and some paint and just use my water on a brush or paint on a brush and just kind of blur that and make that something else. So, you know, sometimes you just feel like scribbling it out. And that's what it is. You just scribble it out. I don't have any white paint, so I'm just going to use my gesso here. I'm just going to needed something a little bit lighter there. So while this dries, see, you can't even tell. I started out with a little complaint about my day. It's gone. So the reason I point this out is because sometimes we just get in a mood and it's natural. We're humans, emotions come and we can have emotions go just as quickly by transforming them with art or with words or anything, you know, anything in the art journal. Again, this is not anything that is going to be hanging in a museum or a gallery, so I don't have to worry about it. So I can write literally anything I want to, like, I hate my stupid neighbor, whatever, you know, you want, you could just change it into something else. And by the end of your art session, maybe you feel like, not so bad. So that's one thing with the water soluble is just start, pick a color and just start. Okay. Now let's talk about how to prep your pages with the gesso. I talked about how you can prep your pages, but I'm actually going to do this with a color. So I'm going to start with, let's start with a kind of a darker blue. My caps are not participating with me today. They're all plugged up. And actually, I'm going to need to flip pages into another. If I flip that over, my pages are going to stick together. So I'm going to pull out my other journal. And this is kind of something where I can work back and forth. So I'm going to go to my other journal, grab a paper towel, put it behind so I don't end up painting on my pages behind. And this is going to be a quick way to put color all over a page, but not using a brush. So to make quick work of it, you can take an old plastic card, like a rewards card or a hotel room key. Or if you have something like this with a handle on it, sometimes you'll see these with the palette knives, paint knives at the art supply store. This gives you a little bit more control because it's got a handle. But even if you had a piece of cardboard, you could do this if you didn't have a plastic card. So what I'm doing is just picking up some paint on the plastic card and I'm just swiping it across my art journal page. And this is making really quick work of getting my whole page covered. So this would be the same thing that I would do with a gesso if I wanted to prep a page. If I wasn't really sure if it was gonna, you know, if it was gonna be a thinner paper and I just wanted to get down some something to prep it with. Here I'm blending colors and it's getting all crazy. But I could do this with gesso. Okay, so pretend like I covered my whole page with that. Okay, just pretend, fast forward. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you about using stencils. Okay. Sorry, things are sliding around here. Before this completely sets up or completely dries, it feels a little bit cool to the touch, which tells me it's still a little bit wet. I'm going to take a wipe. We all tend to have wipes around, right, these days because of, you know, COVID. But you could use a baby wipe. Any kind of wipe really will work for this. And then I'm going to take a stencil. I have a whole bunch of stencils here. I'm going to use this one. and I'm going to put it over the paint, and I'm just going to rub. This is called reduction stenciling. Okay, so what I'm actually doing is I'm pulling the paint through the stencil and just rubbing it before it completely dries. That's when this works the best. So if I remove the stencil, hopefully you can see this. It kind of gives it kind of a ghost effect there because I pulled some of the pigment up through the stencil. So that's one way to use a stencil. That's called reduction stenciling. Then I'm going to get a different color just so that you can see the difference here. The regular way to use a stencil, let's flip to a different stencil here, is using the pouncing technique. And what I do is I get these cosmetic wedges from the drugstore, and you know, they're really one-time use sort of a thing, these cosmetic wedges. And what I'll do is dip that in the paint and then tap most of the paint off so that it's kind of a drier sponge. This is not completely saturated in that it's got globs of paint on it. It's a little bit drier of a sponge. And then I can just pounce straight up and down to get that color pressed through the stencil. Okay, so that's the typical way that we're used to working with a stencil, is using either a very dense brush or these cosmetic wedges, because they're very dense and they hold a lot of paint. It doesn't look like there's much on my sponge, but there actually is quite a bit. I can keep on using this until I need to reload it and then dip it back in the paint and keep going. Okay, so there's two ways to use a stencil. The third way to use a stencil would be just to use it to trace an image. So let me grab a gel pen here, and I'm just going to trace this flower over here. So you might find an image, you know, if you're not really terrific at sketching, or you just don't want to think about sketching, you could just grab, you know, a stencil for the shapes or the image that it has and just use it to trace. So this had some old doodads up here that I missed. Okay, so there's three ways to use a stencil right off the bat. And that didn't take very long at all. I just kind of brushed on some color, did a few things, and we're already off to the races. So I already have a good start on a page. Any questions about any of these techniques so far? I have like an empty area here. So what I love to do for polka dots is I'll take my brush, I'll take the opposite end and just dab it into the paint, and I can make some polka dots. Just, you know, fun patterns, just fill in some empty space there. It's just really about playing and having fun. Okay, collage. Let me talk to you about collage next. You might have traveled somewhere and you have some memories that you brought back and you want to do a journal page that's based on where you stayed. So this is from the lavender farm up at Washington Island. So I grabbed a bit of the shopping bag and their business card and just some little doilies and tissue. And then I just, you know, drew and painted the lavender. And then what I love to do is use music in my collage quite a bit. So I have some old songbooks and I just happen to be flipping to a page. Sometimes the first page I'll flip to will just serendipitously have a theme that fits. So this says Sweet Thoughts of Heaven, and it's a little bit of music that I thought you know, works well with the page. So if you wanted to do a journal page that commemorates a special memory or a vacation or, you know, gifts or handwritten notes, you could collage that into a page, and then you could, on the facing page here, write about it. So for collage, there's two products that I would recommend, and that is Mod Podge. I always buy the matte version. It says it's water-based glue, sealer, and finish, but I will tell you, this is hard on brushes because it's almost like a watered down Elmer's glue. And I won't use my best acrylic brushes to apply Mod Podge. Instead, I'll get these sponge wedges, and it makes an ease of using the Mod Podge. So what I usually do is just put this into a little, like a Dixie cup or something, and then paint the glue onto my page and put the collage down on top, whatever I'm doing, the paper, and then do a sealing coat on top. If you were concerned a little bit both about the stickiness of it and whether it's archival, then I would recommend getting a matte gel medium. And this is sold wherever they would sell, you know, your better acrylic paints in the store. So what this is the base of an acrylic paint without the color, without pigment added. And it also cleans up the same way as you would clean up acrylic paint, and that's just with water. So both of these products dry clear, so you don't have to worry about, you know, putting something down and having it only be a glue layer because it's gonna, you know, modify the color of what you're collaging. It's not going to do that. So I'm just going to look for something that I can stick down here and be a fun collage. See, this is I have a whole container here of scraps and things that I will use. There's a heart. I don't know, all kinds of things, doilies. You never know what gets pulled out of the recycle bin at my house. So doilies, usually when I'm collaging, I kind of rip paper. I am not all that specific about cutting anything because I like the natural kind of organic way that the rips and tears will work together. So as you notice, I kind of painted the adhesive onto my page, then stuck down this little bit of doily, and then I do a sealing coat on top just to make sure that it's down and it's not going to go anywhere. Now, again, this is an art journal. So if all you have is a glue stick, you're good with a glue stick. It doesn't have to be something that's, you know, here for posterity. Although this matte gel, I think, is the most archival that you can use if you're going to do collage. Okay, questions so far? Any questions? All right, either y'all are a quiet group or you're anxiously waiting for me to get to a techniques that you can participate in as well, right? I'm gonna get rid of my acrylic paint because I'm gonna switch over to watercolor now. And yes, you can tell I use a variety of materials in my art journal. It could be just about anything. As long as it's got color, I will use it. So I'm gonna grab my trusty old watercolor set here. And a brush. And what I want you to do is just pick a shape, any old shape. You can paint with me. I'm kind of partial to circles and spheres. So this is kind of what we're going to do. We're just going to pick a shape and we're going to repeat that same shape. And we're going to overlap some and we're going to fill some in and we're going to outline some. And what this does is it takes away the the need to have something look a certain way, like, oh, I'm going to draw my puppy dog, or I'm going to paint my puppy dog, then we want to get out of our minds, our critical minds that are going to say, well, that doesn't look like the dog's ear or whatever. Forget that. We're just going to pick a shape. So I've done circles. Here's circles. Those are spheres, olives, whatever you want to call them. So I love circles, but I feel like I've done them quite a lot. So I'm just going to paint some flowers or maybe some fall leaves. I don't know what sounds good.
Jennifer?
Yes.
We have one question from somebody who wants you to show the label of what the product that you just used.
For the matte gel?
Yeah, the person just wrote, show the label of then they wrote ... So I'm not sure which label they're referring to, but maybe that's what it is.
Okay, so it's probably either the gesso, Gesso. That's how you would prep your surface if you're not sure that the page is going to take the water media. The other thing for collage is either Mod Podge or matte gel. And it's a medium. This is by Liquitex, but any company that makes acrylic paints will make a gel medium. So I buy the matte just because I don't prefer gloss. I feel like when I close my art journal up, after everything is dried, the gloss tends to stick to each other. So I can actually show you kind of what that is like. So in this journal, when I first started out, I used Mod Podge pretty much exclusively. And you hear that? Even though I buy the matte finish, as you can see, there is still a sheen to it. You can see it's shiny, right? And that's even though that's called matte. I don't think it's matte. So what happens is, we live in a climate that gets kind of humid. And when these, facing pages that are both Mod Podge stick together, you have to kind of pry them apart. So to get around that, you could put a sheet of tracing paper or parchment or wax paper in between your collage sheets to make sure that that doesn't happen. But it's just because, when I first started out, I didn't really know. I just was grabbing things and collaging them down, little bits of this and that. So that's what happens if you use Mod Podge. If you use a matte gel, it truly is matte. It's not going to do that. Okay, did that answer your question?
I think it did. They didn't say anything else, so.
Okay. All righty. So let's get into our paints. I'm gonna use watercolor, like I said. And my shape or symbol, pick a shape or a symbol, it doesn't matter. If you want to stick to a geometric shape, that might be the easiest, to just let your mind concentrate on a geometric shape, like my circles. I'm gonna just do some loopy flowers like I started with when I did my my Neocolor example. When I started, I'm just gonna kind of do some flowers, and I'm gonna loop them and change color and overlap some, just because I'm gonna want some variety. I'm gonna be really bored after a while painting the same exact flower. So I'm gonna do different flowers. If you're doing a shape, what you're going to notice is, like when I'm using the watercolor, the pink here is bleeding into the orange, and I'm okay with that. I'm just going to let everything kind of be fluid and do its thing. But I'm just going to do a whole page of flowers. So you're going to do a whole page of whatever shape or symbol. Some people like hearts. Some people like diamonds. Whatever it is, it's the right thing for you. This is where you get to decide what your page is going to look like. And let's see, blue flowers. So if anybody ever kept a diary, you can see how this is kind of similar to a diary, but it's using imagery. And you don't always have to, pre-plan everything when you sit down. Sometimes it's just about playing with shapes and color. And that's all it really needs to be. That's the therapeutic part about working in an art journal. It's kind of, the adult coloring book phase that was really big a couple of years ago. Same sort of idea where, somebody's planned out a page for you and you just spend the time filling in the color. It's that same sort of benefit of working with colors. So let's see, what type of shapes are people working with? Just so that I can be curious. Have some audience participation here. Sometimes you can just do half, like I did half a flower there. Do half a shape. We got a quiet group today, Roz. Quiet group. See, purple. I haven't used purple. Okay, so I think I saw initially some people say that they were scrapbookers. So they were interested in doing this. Do you see kind of how a lot of those same supplies can be used for your art journal? Or if people are, worried about, I don't know, I'm going to run out of things to do or say in my art journal. Just Google. I will tell you, if you just Google art journal prompts, you'll probably come up with a bazillion and one ideas. You will not ever run out of anything to work on in your art journal. That's if you want a prompt. I led a art journaling group on Sunday afternoons, and they wanted a prompt every week. So we did a prompt and we also married it with techniques. So we did our different mixed media art technique every week. So that over the 6 weeks that we met, we kind of build techniques, our kind of little knowledge bank over the time. But if you are really like, I don't have a clue what I want to do in my art journal, it can just be playing with colors, but you can also just Google prompts and come up with some ideas. I'm sort of getting to the end of my page. How's everybody else doing? I tend to paint fast, so if you're not this far along, don't feel rushed. I've learned lately, because I was working on kind of an illustration project. I've learned to doodle with my brush. Just not pre-draw, just start painting. And some interesting things come about that way. Okay, so I've kind of filled up my page. So I don't have any green. I don't have any leaves or anything like that. So maybe I'll put a couple here and there. But, you know, if you're doing a shape, just continue to work with your shape. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about time frame, because when you're working in your art journal, I try not to have it be like I have to sit down and I have to do an entire page or 2 pages, you know, a 2-page spread. And it's got to be perfect from the time I start to the time I finish. As you can see, when I flip through my my art journal, there are a lot of pages that were not done, where I just kind of set up a background because I had some leftover paint, and that background is ready for me, you know, when I have more time to come back and finish it and do something with it. So don't feel like, you know, the pressure is on here to complete either, you know, writing or an art image of any sort. It can just simply be playing with color, or putting down a background, or setting up some collage that you can come back then later on and do something with, make it into something. Or maybe it's not ever anything, you know. So I have pages that I started and never finished. And thus I have several art journals going at the same time. But if you do only have a limited amount of time, what I sometimes do, especially if I haven't done art in a while and I really feel like I need to do something creative, I'll set a timer and say I only have 20 minutes. You can get a lot done in 20 minutes. You saw how I kind of whipped together that 1 page of stencils, and it came together really, really quickly. So what I'll do is take the amount of time that I have, 20 minutes, and I'll cut it in half, and I'll set a timer for 10 minutes, and I'll do some art. And then when the timer goes off, okay, then I'll come over here and I'll write for 10 minutes, set the timer again for 10 minutes, and just kind of do some free writing, just stream of consciousness writing. And what happens is, if you do this for any amount of time and you set out to do a regular art journal practice, you will find that some days you will be writing, and the timer will go off and you're not done writing. Other times you'll write like 3 sentences and it'll seem like an eternity until that timer goes off. It just is whatever it is that at that particular time. So it's a way to process things, thoughts and ideas. And sometimes when you sit down and start writing, it's like, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. And then suddenly things will start flowing, because again, it's stream of consciousness. If you're not following a writing prompt, it doesn't have to be anything. It can be an observation. It can be about a TV show you watched the night before. Literally, it can be anything. So when I sit down to write on my facing page, and I'm right-handed, which is why I do images on the right page and writing on the left page. Usually I'll put a date just so I have a reference if I want to look back later and see what I was doing or thinking about at any certain time. I'll do the date. I'll maybe start with an observation or something that might be going on, and then I'll just let it flow and do stream of consciousness. Other times, you know, I might be looking through an old book or sheet music like I showed you earlier, and there might be words that just jump right off the page at me, and I've got to use that word or phrase in a page like this. I actually have a printout of affirmations, and that's what I snipped these words out of. But this could have just as easily been clipped off out of the newspaper or a magazine or anything really. It can be anything that can be a kind of a springboard for an idea for an art journal page. So you can be writing things that will support your own emotions. You can be just cataloging things that happen. It can be a list of your favorite books or movies or songs or anything like that. There's literally no end to what you can do in an art journal. So I'm gonna take a sip of water here, and then I'll turn my camera around so that I can see if you all were doing some art right along with me, or if you have questions or observations. We can check in and see how that goes. There's my doodle page of flowers. Okay. Let's see. Let's turn off my bright light. So how did everybody do? Comments, questions, observations?
Very enjoyable.
Great. Did you work right along with us, or you got some ideas that you're going to work with later on?
Working for something later on. I didn't have a chance to get set up for this.
Okay. Well, this kind of just was the tip of the iceberg. Like I said, if you go looking on the internet for people that do art journaling, you will find all kinds of inspiration, different ways that people are using their art journal. Like I said, a lot of times it's just working things out, ideas before I take the idea larger to the canvas or anything. But sometimes it just is playing with color.
This was inspiring. I don't know that I have to go someplace else. This is plenty inspiring.
Okay, good. Wonderful.
Jennifer,
Well,
there's some comments in the chat. I don't know if you can
Okay.
see those from your screen.
Oh, let me click over there so I can see.
What was the name of those markers you used?
The Neocolors, the pastel crayons, or
Yeah, you said were water soluble.
yes. Where did I throw them? Okay, so this is made by a Swiss company called Caran d'Ache, and they are Neocolors, and they are pastel crayons that are water soluble. But there are so many brands. If you just walked into the art store or Michael's or wherever and just looked for anything water soluble, even watercolor pencils. I use another brand by Derwent that makes ink tents is what they're called, INKTENSE, ink tents. When you shoot them with the water, they come alive. They're very colorful. So those are the two brands that I would recommend for any sort of art. And I use these on canvas too. I use them as a layer in my mixed media art because I love them. Once you set them with water, they become permanent and they won't reactivate. So I just love them. But anything that says water soluble should work pretty much the same way. There are, I'm trying to think, Faber-Castell makes something called gelatos, and that's a chunkier, almost like lipstick. So, depending on the thickness or thinness of the tool that you want to be using, there's quite a lot on the market that you can find. Okay, let me go back to the chat. Stamps, dies, and stencils. Yes, yes, use it all. Yeah, and you don't feel like you need to stay in the lines. Nope. Don't stay in the lines, color outside the lines. Those are there just really as starting points, jumping off points. So use them every which way. I have a collection of stencils for bucket journaling, bullet journaling. And now you have new ways to use stencils. Yes. I just showed you 3 ways, but I will say I use my stencils with watercolor. I use them with heavier paints and a palette knife to push that paint through. And when I remove the stencil, I have something that's a little bit more dimensional. There are just so many ways. Again, Stencil Girl Products is the company that I designed for, and they have a team of artists that all they do is release new projects every month. So you will get so many ideas if you just go and look at Stencil Girl. I mean, my stencils, another word on stencils, because I know that a lot of people will use these. The acetate that this is made out of, the plastic, this is a thicker acetate, and I've bought and used a lot of stencils. And if you get one where the acetate is not that thick, they will bend, they'll dog ear, they'll just not take the wear and tear that these stencils will take. So if you're on the market looking for stencils, I know it's kind of hard to see in packaging if the plastic is any good, but you're going to want to get something that's a thicker plastic that will hold up to everything that you're going to want to do with them in mixed media. I've gotten a lot of stencils that just were not worth the packaging they came in, unfortunately. The ones that I have here are the 6x6. There's also a mini 4x4 and then 9x12s. So they're from this particular company. They do come in different sizes. I like the 6x6s because they're handy, but I also use them with my jelly plate, which is 6x6. So I do mono printing with them as well. Okay, any other questions or anybody wants to share? You'll have to unmute yourself and talk so that I can find you. I'm on my phone, so I have to scroll through and find anybody that wants to share.
This was recorded, is that correct?
Mhm.
Are you going to put this up where we can re-access it again?
Roz will have to answer
Yes,
that.
I will put it on the library's YouTube channel, and you'll receive an email from me tomorrow with the link.
Good, thank you.